You sit here, perhaps even now, with that ache you cannot quite name. The room hums and you pick it up before anyone else notices. The compliments sting. You're so kind, so good, so generous. And yet inside it feels like punishment. What the world praises as empathy has, for you, been both balm and burden. Let me tell you something quietly, almost in a whisper, meant for your bones. This ache is not the sign of your holiness. It is the scar of your survival. Many people imagine the empath as a rare gift, almost mystical, as if the universe singled you out to carry a lantern for others. But scars are not gifts. They are proofs of endurance. When I say your empathy is not bestowed from above but forged from below, I do not diminish you. I reframe you. You were not chosen to bleed for others. You learned to survive by bending toward their storms. You were forced to sense danger early, to tune your nervous system like a seismograph trembling at the faintest tremor of someone else's rage, sadness, or silence. The myth of the empath as a saintly creature floats around modern culture. But if you pause, you feel its falseness. A saint chooses sacrifice. You did not. You adapted. You shaped yourself into a mirror, not because you wanted to, but because it was the only way to keep the peace in your childhood house. So when people now call you compassionate, it is only half true. The fuller truth is more haunting. What they see as compassion is the residue of adaptation. Ask yourself, how many times did you withhold your own hunger so another could eat first? How many times did you swallow tears because someone else's were louder? The child in you learned that to be selfish was dangerous, even deadly. So you buried your needs deep, like contraband in a locked chest. From that burial, a survival skill was born. Sensitivity became your shield. Absorption became your safety. But notice this. When you breathe in everyone else's storms, your own breath shortens. When you scan the energy of a room before daring to speak, your voice becomes a prisoner. The lantern you carry lights the way for others, but it drains the oil of your own soul. This is why I must tell you plainly, empathy without boundaries is not a miracle. It is repetition. It is the echo of the same survival pattern replaying long after the danger is gone. I want you to consider the possibility that empathy, as you know it, is not your essence but your scar. And scars, though permanent, are not destiny. They remind you where you have been, not where you must stay. If your sensitivity was born from survival, then healing must begin with truth. You do not need to serve as the emotional regulator for the unhealed. You are allowed to step back. You are allowed to rest your lantern. You are allowed, finally, to choose yourself. So, as we step deeper into this story together, take this permission with you. You can place the mirror where the lantern once stood. You can reflect your own life back to yourself. You can claim what was once forbidden, the right to exist for your own sake. This is only the beginning. We have unmasked the empath's gift as a scar. Next, we will descend further into the original wound. The child who was never allowed to be selfish. Picture the earliest years of your life as a house filled with invisible rules. No one may have written them on the walls, but you felt them in your skin. The rule was simple. Your needs are too much. Your laughter too loud. Your sadness too inconvenient. Your anger too dangerous. And so you learned quickly that being yourself was unsafe. You were loved if you could erase yourself. Perhaps your mother's grief soaked into your cradle, each sob teaching you that your job was to soothe, not to cry. Perhaps your father's anger crackled through the air like thunder, and you became a human barometer, predicting the storm before he even opened his mouth. Whatever the details, the pattern was clear. To survive, you could not be selfish. To be selfish was to invite chaos, punishment, or abandonment, so you became the watchful child. You practiced silence like an art form. You made yourself small so others could be big. You gave comfort even when you had none. And in return, you received the illusion of safety. Your family could carry their storms because you became their umbrella. But what shielded them drenched you. This is the tragedy. The child who should have been free to say, "I want, I need, I hurt," instead learned to disappear. Instead of growing into a self, you rehearsed a role. The caretaker, the good one, the reliable listener. Even now, as an adult, you may feel that any expression of need is dangerous. You may apologize for taking up space. You may rush to anticipate others' feelings before they are even spoken. This reflex is not kindness. It is a contract written in childhood ink. And yet, here is the paradox. What the world calls empathy is, at its root, the record of this forbidden selfishness. It is the story of a child who once wanted to be seen, but was told it was wrong. That child is still inside you, waiting for permission. Waiting for someone, maybe for you, to say, "Your needs matter too." When you look back at your own childhood, you may notice how subtle the training was. Perhaps no one shouted, "Don't be selfish." Instead, it was the raised eyebrow when you asked for more food, the sigh when you cried too long, the praise when you kept quiet and smiled politely. Over time, you internalized the law. Silence equals safety, invisibility equals love. But silence is not safety. Invisibility is not love. What you learned to call protection was actually erasure, and the child who was erased does not vanish. She hides in your shadow, surfacing each time you feel exhausted, unseen, or resentful after helping others. She is the one whispering inside you. What about me? This is the heart of the empath's childhood wound. The belief that existing for yourself is selfish, and selfishness is sin. But Jung taught us that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires reclaiming precisely what was once forbidden. To find yourself, you must give that inner child the permission she never had. To say no without apology, to rest without guilt, to want without shame. Notice how radical that feels in your body. Even imagining it may trigger guilt. That is the echo of the old rule still alive in you. But hear this. The guilt is not truth. The guilt is a ghost. It is the leftover voice of a family contract that no longer binds you. You are no longer the child trying to keep the peace. You are the adult who can write new rules. So let us carry this awareness forward. The empath is born from a childhood where selfishness was outlawed. The wound is ancient, but it is not eternal. Healing begins when you grant yourself what was once forbidden. And now, with the wound revealed, we move to the next layer. How that child's vigilance hardened into a skill the world mistakes for intuition. Think for a moment about the way you enter a room. Your eyes sweep across faces. Your body notes every shift in tone. Your skin catches the tremor of unspoken words. Before anyone else, you sense the storm. People call it intuition. They say you have a gift for reading energy, for knowing what others feel before they do. And it is true. You can. But the origin of that ability is not mystical. It is survival. When you were small, your nervous system became a living radar. You learned to detect the slightest changes in mood because your safety depended on it. A slammed door, a tightened jaw, a sigh too heavy. These were not small things to you. They were signals, warnings, instructions. Adapt now or pay later. You became hypervigilant, and hypervigilance, polished over years, can look almost magical to outsiders. But let's be honest, hypervigilance is exhausting. It is not compassion. It is a body bracing for danger that may never come. You do not scan a room because you want to. You scan it because you once had no choice. And now the habit clings to you even when the original danger is gone. This is why, when people call your empathy a superpower, the compliment lands strangely. Yes, it feels flattering, but beneath it there is fatigue. Because you know the cost. Your so-called gift often leaves you drained, restless, burned out. You cannot switch it off. You absorb every ripple until you cannot find your own center. What looks like intuition to others is, for you, the ache of a body that never learned to relax. Pause and notice your breath right now. Is it shallow? Do you feel the subtle tension in your shoulders, as if you're always preparing? That is hypervigilance living in your muscles. It is the leftover armor from a war you fought long ago. And while it kept you safe then, it steals your peace now. We must make a distinction that the child inside you never learned. Empathy is not absorption. Real empathy allows you to feel with others while staying rooted in yourself. Absorption erases you. Hypervigilance convinces you that dissolving into another's mood is necessary. But Jung would remind us, individuation requires differentiation. To know yourself as whole, you must draw the line between their storm and your sky. Imagine this. You walk into the same room, and instead of scanning, you breathe. Instead of predicting, you remain. Instead of absorbing, you observe. The storm may swirl, but you do not dissolve. This is not coldness. This is conscious choice. And conscious choice is the beginning of freedom. Of course, freedom feels frightening at first. When you stop monitoring everyone else's moods, guilt whispers, "You're selfish. You don't care. You'll be abandoned." But those voices are relics of the old contract. They are not reality. They are the past replaying itself, trying to keep you bound. And here is the truth. You are not bound anymore. Hypervigilance was a brilliant adaptation for a child. But for the adult, it is a prison. To dismantle it, you must return what never belonged to you, the responsibility for other people's feelings. Their storms are theirs to weather. Your task is not to be their barometer, but to be your own anchor. This shift will not come all at once. It begins with small acts of noticing. I feel tense, but that tension is not mine. I sense anger, but it belongs across the table. Each recognition is a step away from hypervigilance and a step toward wholeness. So let us carry this clarity forward. What the world admires as intuition is often trauma wearing a mask. But masks can be set down. And when you set this one down, you make space for something truer, sacred, healthy selfishness. That is where we turn next. You have carried the weight of other people's storms for so long that the idea of turning inward feels almost dangerous. To put yourself first, to say no, to rest while others ache, this once felt like betrayal. But here is the turning point. What you were taught to fear as selfishness is, in truth, the seed of your healing. Selfishness, in its distorted form, was the shadow your family cast over you. You were told it was ugly, sinful, wrong. Yet without it, you were never permitted to fully exist. Jung called the process of individuation the journey toward wholeness, and no one can be whole without claiming the right to have needs. Sacred selfishness is not egoic greed. It is the quiet insistence that I exist. I matter. My life belongs to me. Picture again that child in the forest of eyes, holding a lantern for others. The trees whisper, the gaze presses down. Guide us. Heal us. Don't stop. For years you obeyed, burning your own oil for their warmth, but now, imagine the child setting the lantern down, closing her eyes, and listening only to her heartbeat. That stillness is selfishness in its holy form. It is not rejection of others. It is acceptance of self. When you begin to practice sacred selfishness, the world may resist. Friends might say you have changed. Family may call you cold. Lovers may accuse you of withdrawing. This is not proof you are wrong. It is proof that you are no longer playing the role they depended on. And yes, it may hurt. But pain in this moment is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of birth. Think of boundaries not as walls, but as altars. Each time you say no, you are not attacking someone. You are building a sacred space where your soul can breathe. Each time you rest instead of rushing, you are not lazy. You are tending to your inner temple. Each time you choose silence over people-pleasing, you are not cruel. You are listening to your own spirit. Sacred selfishness asks you to trade performance for presence. Instead of proving your worth by giving until you collapse, you begin to believe that your worth is intrinsic. Instead of rescuing others as a way to feel safe, you trust that you are safe even when others are disappointed. Instead of dissolving into the moods of those around you, you anchor into the rhythm of your own breath. This shift is not a rejection of compassion. It is its transformation. Only when you honor yourself can your empathy become clean, unentangled, and free of hidden contracts. I help you so you will love me turns into I love myself, and from that fullness, I choose to help if I wish. The contract of survival breaks, and a covenant of authenticity begins. Of course, guilt will appear at first, like a ghost rattling its chains. It will whisper, "You are abandoning them. You are selfish. You are wrong." But guilt is simply the echo of an old system that thrived on your erasure. Sacred selfishness teaches you to recognize guilt as a false alarm, not as truth. With practice, each act of self-prioritization becomes less frightening and more natural, until the phrase, "I matter," no longer trembles but stands steady. So here is the paradox. The very trait you were forbidden to express as a child is the one you must reclaim as an adult. Selfishness, once condemned, becomes the compass pointing you home. It does not isolate you. It anchors you. It does not make you cruel. It makes you real. And with this new compass in your hands, we now step into the deepest chamber of the psyche, the shadow, where all the disowned parts of you wait to be seen without shame. Deep in the landscape of your unconscious lies the shadow. Jung used this word not to describe evil, but to name what has been exiled, denied, or shamed. For the empath, the shadow is thick with forbidden qualities: rage, desire, entitlement, arrogance, selfishness. These words may taste bitter on your tongue, but they are not poison. They are nutrients hidden in soil you were told never to touch. As a child, you learned that certain feelings would cost you love. Anger made you dangerous. Wanting made you greedy. Resting made you lazy. And so you swallowed those impulses, pressing them into the cellar of your psyche. On the surface, you became the good one, the helper, the listener. But beneath, the shadow grew heavy with all that you refused to claim. The cost of this exile is subtle, but relentless. You find yourself exhausted after giving because the hidden part of you resents the gift. You swallow anger so long it hardens into silent bitterness. You feel invisible because your entitlement, the right to be seen, was locked away. In trying to be endlessly good, you fracture yourself into servant and prisoner. The path forward is not to kill the shadow, but to invite it back. Integration does not mean letting rage rule you. It means recognizing rage as sacred fire that signals a boundary. It does not mean indulging arrogance. It means remembering that dignity is your birthright. It does not mean wallowing in selfishness. It means honoring the compass that points you toward your own needs. Consider this. When you say no with steady calm, you are embodying your shadow's gift of strength. When you allow yourself to feel irritation instead of hiding it, you are letting your shadow breathe. When you claim your need for rest without apology, you are letting your shadow return as an ally rather than an enemy. Too many empaths mistake martyrdom for love. They believe that erasing themselves proves their goodness. But without shadow integration, compassion becomes a performance. You give not from fullness, but from fear. If I fix you, maybe I will be safe. If I heal you, maybe I will finally be loved. But love bought with self-erasure is not love. It is debt. And living in emotional debt is a slow suffocation. Imagine instead a self who is whole. In that self, the child who wanted is allowed to want. The one who raged is allowed to rage in healthy measure. The one who longed to be selfish is allowed to choose self without shame. Integration is not indulgence. It is alignment. It is the quiet confidence of a soul that no longer wars with itself. This is why shadow work is sacred. It transforms you from servant into sovereign, from saint addicted to suffering into human being allowed to breathe. It teaches you that wholeness is not perfection, but inclusion. Every exiled piece must be invited back, not to dominate, but to belong. So when you feel guilt rise as you say no, remember, guilt is the ghost of an old contract. You do not need to obey it. When you sense anger surface, hear it as a boundary calling to be named. When you feel desire awaken, recognize it as life asking to flow again. The empath without a shadow is an empty shell, giving endlessly but never filled. The empath with a shadow reclaimed becomes radiant, not because they please everyone, but because they are whole. And wholeness, unlike martyrdom, is contagious. It awakens truth in those who witness it. From here, our journey nears its quiet summit. Having reclaimed the shadow, we now turn to what waits beyond. Sovereignty, the gentle authority of a self no longer defined by service or survival, but by the steady flame of wholeness. There comes a moment when the empath, no longer carrying the lantern for others, turns and holds up a mirror. This is the threshold of sovereignty. After years of absorbing, predicting, fixing, and disappearing, you begin to realize that your presence alone, authentic, bounded, unapologetic, is the true offering. Sovereignty does not arrive as a trumpet blast. It does not feel like conquest. It is quiet, almost shy at first, like a door unlocking deep in your bones. You notice it in small ways. You decline an invitation without explaining. You rest without justifying. You say no, and your chest does not tighten. You feel your anger rise, and instead of swallowing it, you let it guide you to speak honestly. Each act of self-allegiance is a small revolution, a declaration. I exist. I matter. I begin here. At first, the world resists. Those who benefited from your endless giving may call you selfish, distant, cold. But sovereignty teaches you to withstand their disappointment. Their discomfort is not your betrayal. It is their invitation to grow. You are no longer responsible for carrying the chaos of others. You are responsible for holding the integrity of yourself. In sovereignty, empathy does not vanish. It clarifies. You still feel deeply, but now you feel with, not for. You can sit with another's grief without losing yourself in it. You can listen to another's rage without absorbing it as your own. Boundaries are no longer walls. They are sacred edges that let connection thrive without collapse. This transformation may look subtle from the outside, but inside, it is seismic. You are no longer the child scrambling to avoid punishment. You are no longer the adult who confuses exhaustion with virtue. You are the self, what Jung described as the archetype of wholeness, finally emerging. Individuation, the process of becoming whole, is not an ascent into perfection, but a return to yourself, to every piece once lost or forbidden. Notice what changes when you live this way. Relationships shift. You attract those who are whole rather than hungry. You no longer confuse chaos with love. Silence no longer terrifies you. It restores you. Your worth is no longer measured by how much you carry for others, but by how faithfully you honor yourself. This is sovereignty, not loud, not defiant, but steady. A flame that does not flicker in every gust of wind. A presence that does not shrink for the comfort of others. A life that radiates truth simply by being lived. And now, as our journey closes, remember this. The empath is not broken. The empath is incomplete until they reclaim the selfish child within. When that child is welcomed home, the empath becomes not a martyr, not a rescuer, but a whole human soul. Wholeness is the contagion the world most desperately needs. So lay down the lantern, lift up the mirror. Let your presence say what words cannot. I am here. I am whole. I am free. As the story settles, let us slow our pace. You began this journey as the empath praised for endless kindness, yet aching in silence. We traced the scar back to its root. The child forbidden to be selfish. The child who learned that invisibility equals safety. From there, we saw how hypervigilance masqueraded as intuition, how survival strategies became celebrated as gifts. But you have walked deeper, reclaiming selfishness as sacred, integrating the shadow with compassion, and arriving at sovereignty, your rightful home. The end does not roar, it whispers. You are not asked to save anyone here, not asked to prove, not asked to perform. You are asked only to return, to yourself, to your breath, to your body. And in that return, you discover what was hidden all along. Love is not the erasure of self, but the embrace of self. In the opening, you carried a lantern for others. Now you hold a mirror for yourself. That mirror reflects not just your wounds, but your wholeness. It shows the face of someone no longer willing to disappear in order to belong. It shows the adult who blesses the child within, saying, "You are allowed. You are enough. You are free." So let us land gently, with cadence like waves receding. I exist. I matter. I begin here. Carry that into your day. Choose one boundary in the next 24 hours. A simple no spoken with kindness. A pause where you once would have rushed. A moment of rest without apology. And bless yourself with one quiet line. May I honor my own soul today. As you do, feel the tide turn. Feel the door inside your bones unlock. You are no longer the candle burning out to give others light. You are the sun, radiant, whole, impossible to diminish. And those who cannot stand your light, bless them and let them find their own. This is not the end of empathy. It is the rebirth of empathy. No longer absorption, but presence. No longer martyrdom, but sovereignty. No longer performance, but truth. And in that truth, the world is transformed. Not because you disappear, but because you finally appear.